Hi, everyone. My name is Briana Hinga. I use she and her pronouns. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all in this conversation. This is part of a panel series called Reimagining Sustainable Democracies. This is part 2. And as we gather, I'm going to ask us to just take a moment to ground ourselves with some presence. So if you feel comfortable to just maybe even shake it out a little bit, just feel your body, become present to your body. Maybe feel your feet on the ground. And I invite you to keep your eyes open actually, and to notice your breath. And just to notice if it's shallow, if it's deep. Maybe you can bring a little more depth to your breath and you can feel your breath filling up your belly. And as you exhale, just notice that you're letting go of what you don't need. And as you let go, you're actually giving life to the plants around us. And as you inhale again, maybe you feel into your body, your emotions, sensations, temperature. And you exhale, you just let go what you don't need. And then the final breath together, just take a nice deep inhale and just notice people around you. Maybe you're looking around, maybe you're making eye contact, and just seeing the beautiful people that we get to be in community with today. And I invite you to stay attuned to your breath as an anchor to presence today. Because, this series is really about being present to what is. So as we're looking to reimagine sustainable democracies and the possibilities, it's about being present to what is now and the multiple crises that we're facing, ecological unsustainability, infrastructure insustainability, deep polarities and fractures socially. And also to be present to the beautiful wisdom that we have in our bodies, that we have in our communities, the power that we hold, and to really be present with all of that complexity. And this series and this panel today is really an invitation to show up and sense into new possibilities that might emerge when we are present to what is. And it's not about holding on to or fixing the current systems, but maybe tapping into different ways of being and relating that can bring us into reciprocity and can bring us into more sustainable ways of relating to each other. So the series today, or the panel today, is called Shaping Stories for Authentic Connection Across Difference. And there's this little framing that I think is helpful I'm going to invite you into before introducing the panelists. And it's a framing presented by Vanessa de Oliveira Machado. And she talks about different ways of relating to stories. So we can relate to stories as words and how stories word the world. And that's how we've been socialized to relate to stories. It's seeing stories as words that make sense of our experience. Maybe they prescribe the future. They're basically like logically tying things together, right? That's wording the world. But she also asks us to consider how we might world the world with stories. And that's about noticing how stories are actually living entities that move through us. And so today, as you show up and you hear the panelists and you share your own stories, how might you be present to what might be moving through you as you're listening, as you're relating, as your own stories are part of this conversation? And how might you be present to what's moving through you and might eventually move through you 10 years from now because of what you're present to today. So that's worlding the world. And I'm just asking you to be curious about that. And now I get to introduce our amazing panelists. So I'm going to start with José Miguel Paez. And he uses he, him, his pronouns. He began teaching in the Department of Social Work at CSUN in 2009. Currently, he is an assistant professor. He received his MSW from the University of Southern California in 2001 with an emphasis on families and children. He earned his EDD from CSUN in 2020. He teaches clinical, meso, and macro practice courses. He serves as co-faculty advisor, board member for the CSUN MSW Student Asian American Pacific Islander Social Work Collective. A mouthful. He is a licensed clinical social worker and has worked as a bilingual therapist providing mental health services at various community organizations in the San Fernando Valley and South LA. He has also worked closely with USC's Neighborhood Academic Initiative. So should we actually have Jose come up first before introducing all the panelists, maybe? Yeah, I think that would be great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. I realize this is kind of like a meta thing, seeing here and here. It's a lot of me all at once. So yes, and that's my background. Really excited to be here with you all. It's a real honor to be part of this conversation. Thank you all for organizing it, hosting us, and also thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I went to school here. I graduated in 2001, and every time I get to come back here to USC, it's a really great privilege to be here. Very formative in my experience. As I was thinking about coming to today and talking with you all about this particular topic around shaping stories, I started thinking about, we had a conversation here about what might be a good way to do that, especially when we are feeling fractured or fragmented or polarized, or there's distance between each other. Additionally, sometimes it can create a sense of maybe hopelessness or despair, or a sense of even apathy about things being able to change, or nothing can be able to change. And so what I've started learning with students is that when we begin a space or a classroom or whatever it is, a meeting, and we start by centering some gratitude, gratitude to remember and to call into and to invite all those who came before us, who helped us get to where we're at today. That's been a very rewarding experience. And so that's what I'm hoping we could do here, just to begin, is to invite you into this conversation. I'm gonna have you all pair up just briefly, and or you can get in groups of threes. Just take a moment to think about a story, about a time where somebody helped you to overcome something that you were struggling with. And this could be anything, okay? This could be something really personal, intimate. You have a disclosure, spectrum disclosure here for whatever you would like to share. It could be someone helped me across the street and carried something for me, or opened the door for me, whatever it is, whatever you are struggling with. But call that into mind. And when you're ready, turn to the next person. Make sure you introduce yourself if you don't already know them, and just spend a little bit of time, each person sharing and listening to a story of when someone helped you to overcome something that you were struggling with. Everybody got it? Hopefully everyone online's got it as well. Enjoy your conversation. And we'll take about 4 to 5 minutes here. All right, let's start wrapping up our conversation. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt. Sounds like really good conversations that are going on. I just wanted to ask, like, first of all, what did you all observe? What did you notice here?
Spent so much time getting acquainted that we didn't.
Yeah. Oh.
Did you want to share more?
No.
Yeah. It was meaningful conversation. You were getting to know each other a little bit. What else did you observe? Yeah.
My name is Larry Leach. One of the things that I kind of noticed is, it seemed like as people were sharing these moments,
Yeah.
it was like a fond reflection.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the memory of something that someone maybe did for you, you know, and it kind of brings like a happy moment. You know,
That's it.
That.
Yeah. That's a nice thing to start at 4:15 on a Wednesday, to bring that feeling in here to this room. And did you all notice, like, did people seem like present with you? How did you know? How were they present? Hi,
Hi,
Tinashe.
I noticed we kind of leaned into each other, a little eye contact. Oh, I don't need a mic. Oh, I'm sorry. We were leaning in more, a little eye contact, a couple of touching on the shoulder, like to let her know I'm hearing you. And so, yeah.
Yeah. All those, did anyone else see that or observe that too? Kind of get that sense? Yeah, it's like an attunement. Just very, very quickly this happens. Maybe some of you already knew each other and you already have a connection. Maybe some of you don't know each other. You came in here and just almost instantly you found a connection with somebody. That's very, very powerful. And I think it's an important thing to remember as we are having these kind of conversations around what shapes stories or this particular moment. I just want to say thank you for doing this. Maybe also, if you think about, hold the people in your mind that helped you overcome something. You imagine what it would be like if we invited them into this space, like if they were kind of around us right now, what that would feel like. Looking at them, looking at us, like they just kind of seeing like, I helped that, I'm so proud of that person. I can't believe what they did. Look at you sitting here, like they're looking at me like, look at you doing here, doing this presentation. Just so proud of you. That's a powerful feeling for us. And then the conversations that they could have with each other. It's also really, really meaningful. And it leads into this next idea that I'll share, which is this idea of relational accountability. And again, as I was thinking about this topic for today, and Dr. Ocampo, when he invited me, was talking about this idea of relationality and what that is. And we were just sharing during that exercise. One of the comments or one of the thoughts that I had here was this quote that I heard many years ago. I don't know actually if Dr. Wilson here was the one who said this, but the idea here is that we are not just in relationships with people, we are relationships. This is something that indigenous people have known for a millennia, just generation upon generation. Western science has now caught up to that. And we have it all confirmed, what we've known and what we've been practicing for forever. And that's what Dr. Wilson here is calling attention to, this importance of what he calls relational accountability. Dr. Wilson is a native scholar up in Canada. For those of you who have not read his book, Research and Ceremony, highly encourage folks to read it, especially if you're interested in de-linking from maybe more traditional or what's called traditional research methodologies. This is an indigenous framework. And in this framework, his view is that we need to bring in and systematically bring in all the relationships that we have with one another, with the trees, the sky, the ocean, with the animals in our lives and all around us. All of those have to be accounted for. And being able to think like that as a researcher or as a teacher or whatever job you're in, and just calling into attention all those different types of relationships, I think fosters a different level of accountability or a different obligation that we all have for one another. Maybe it makes us pause just a little bit more when we're talking to somebody or when we make assumptions, have judgments about people right off the bat, and how they're going to be. And when we start in this place, maybe that gives us a pause to have an open perspective to engage with folks and to listen to folks, even if we disagree, even if we have very differing opinions on things. So this is one idea I wanted to share here, and maybe we can think about how this helps us in our day-to-day, in the relationships that we have in our work. And then the other idea I wanted to share, there we go, is an idea from Johanna Hedva. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Johanna Hedva, really incredible artist, poet, writer. And I saw this article. The article is actually called Sick Woman Theory. And I saw this, I think, at the beginning stage of the pandemic around 2020, even though they wrote this article prior to that. So a really tremendous article. It pushes back on a lot of norms, especially a lot of gender specific patriarchal norms that we have in this and cisnormative ideas and values we have in this culture. But one of the things that I like, and I use this in the class often with students, is a way to, again, ground us, not just in relationality, but how we can actively engage in developing our community and developing what they call a politics of care. So I'll read this quote here from Johanna Hedva. It says, "The most anti-capitalist protest is to care for another and to care for yourself. It's to take on the historically feminized and therefore invisible practice of nursing, nurturing, and caring. It's to take seriously each other's vulnerability and fragility and precarity and to support it, to honor it, empower it. It's to protect each other, to enact and practice community, a radical kinship, an interdependent care, an interdependent sociality, a politics of care. And when I first read this, it really gave me pause because these are things I talk about all the time. But now I think what Johanna Hedva is saying is like, well, but actually do it. When you're in the classroom, what does the politics of care look like? You have a nice syllabus. I'm a social worker. We have a great code of ethics. That's not just a plug to invite people to be social workers, but we do have a really legit code of ethics. But it's one thing to have it and another thing to actually enact it and do it on a day-to-day. With all the flaws and the contradictions and hypocrisies that I have and that are not always congruent and that I'm struggling with. And so to bring that into the classroom in an honest way and to look across and look at all the students in the room and see, how are we going to do this? How are we going to build our politics of care? What would be the markers of a politics of care or an interdependent sociality for this class? How would that be rooted for us as an idea of radical kinship or radical, which also Father Boyle talks about from Humboldt Industries. And I think a big part of the way that we do that is to center gratitude, is to take each interaction and try to be as present and as mindful as we can in every interaction that we have, is to listen to each other, is to catch ourselves with our judgments. And that is the things we practice in the class as far as trying to shape stories or listen to stories rather. Yeah, and I think I'm going to pause there because I know we have a few other speakers, but I just want to say thank you so much for trying out this gratitude activity. Feel free to take that on the road, spread more gratitude with other people. I'll turn it over back to our moderator.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Now I get to introduce Kenzo Bergeron. Dr. Kenzo Bergeron serves as Assistant Head of School for Academic Programs, Equity, and Belonging at Village School in Santa Monica, California. His educational leadership spans over 2 decades in independent schools across the Los Angeles area, including previous positions at the Willows Community School, Wildwood School, Crossroads School for the Arts and Sciences. His expertise encompasses curriculum development, inclusive hiring practices, and supporting neurodivergent learners, with a particular focus on leading institutions through periods of crisis and transformation. A scholar practitioner, his research challenges conventional frameworks in education, including his book, Challenging the Cult of Self-Esteem in Education, Education, Psychology, and the Subaltern Self, and his contribution to Decolonizing Interpretive Research, a Subaltern Methodology for Social Change. He is a 2024 NAIS Aspiring Heads Fellow and a 2019 California Teacher Development Collaborative Leadership Fellow. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. You would never know that I wrote that myself. We're not going to do a double bio. I don't want to put you guys through that. I'm going to speak a little bit about intersections of the personal, the political, the professional. And I want to begin by saying I've been thinking long and hard about the meaning of titles, particularly the meaning behind the title of this event. And it is a mouthful. It's a lot to digest, but there were certain themes and words that really jumped out at me. And perhaps cosmically, I read recently a very short story, like 5-6 very crisp pages, right in my wheelhouse. That's about as much time and attention as I can give anything right now with 2 young children at home. But the title of the short story is called I Am Not a Storyteller. And it is about a telemarketer who lives in Seattle who has a very old, sort of worn and torn cat that roams the neighborhood constantly. And this telemarketer is constantly being called by strangers out in the world because they find the cat and find the tag and say, well, I found your cat. And the telemarketer says, the cat should be outside. Please stop calling me, which is, humorous enough to think of a telemarketer being called all the time. But at one point, the telemarketer is called. And after the general exchange, the person on the other end of the line says, your cat has a Jewish name. And the telemarketer says, yes, Jewish name, I'm Jewish, thus the cat's Jewish name. And there begins a process of poking and prodding and prying around positionality from one generation of Jewish experience to another. And clearly, the narrator has a very firm position in being an anti-Zionist, in being pro-Palestinian, and is listening to the person on the other end with a lot of tension, and begins an internal self-dialogue going back and forth. And I've felt that. I was like, oh yeah, I know that feeling. I know that poking and that prodding. Where are you on this spectrum? Who are you on this spectrum? Can I trust you? Do I trust you? Should I trust you in relation? And ends very brilliantly, decides not to confront, which I understand as well, but ends with this notion of, I don't buy into any longer the power of talking it out across difference or the having hard conversations industrial complex. And I think that's an incredibly important notion for us to consider when we get shut down in these moments of interrogation, because oftentimes we are left to interrogate ourselves and there is no progress being made. That is the crux really of my scholarly work. I consider myself a dissident, a disruptor. At my dissertation sort of end of year party with everybody there, somebody called me an iconoclast, which I had to lean over to my wife and say, what's an iconoclast? But you know, somebody who does not accept the okey doke as apparent and obvious, somebody who is willing to shake things up and ask the hard questions. And I juxtapose that with my current position. PWI, predominantly white institution, very homogenous community that burned down in the Palisades fire. And so I've had for a long time to be incredibly careful with the positionality, my forward-facing positionality in the DEI, BJ areas. I've had to be incredibly strategic. I learned that from my mentor, Dr. Darder. Not everything is going to change at once. Slow and steady, be strategic, change can happen. I've adhered to that model very carefully. But boy, oh boy, if you want to see where people's priorities are, have a school burned down. The conversations have been incredibly interesting. And the priority shift has been incredibly interesting. And I think that, in combination with the emboldened position of folks in spaces, community spaces now, who feel empowered to say the quiet part out loud, are pushing us to perhaps not believe so much in the having hard conversations industrial complex, but what does that future look like? What does that pushback look like? So, you know, labor has always been sort of, for me, the expression of the state of my soul at any one moment in time, a snapshot of how I'm feeling, what I'm doing. Estemicide was the title of the dissertation. We changed it when it got published, softened it up, unfortunately. But, you know, putting the suffix "side," the killer, into any publication that has to do with education is bold. And I chose it for a reason. So titles mean something to me. And what is my framework? How do I go about my daily work and deciding what to confront and what not to confront? You know, I think I provided the framework here that I used in my dissertation and that scholarly work to challenge what I called the okey doke narratives. But I thought it would be incredibly important to share that with you, because those are the kinds of things that I go through on a daily basis to sort of calculate what's worth fighting in a moment and to strategize how am I going to push back against it. You know, the other piece that I thought really jumped out at me in the description of tonight's event was, what do we decide to carry forward and what do we release? And again, when you are part of a community that goes through a crisis and you lose the physical structure, it forces you to think very deeply about what it is you're willing to let go of and what it is you are not willing to part with. And that's been an incredible struggle and an incredible tension in my work as a professional. And I've been trying to balance the radical dissident scholarship with the reality of working in an institution that is perhaps not ready for radical change. And how do you balance both of those things, go home at night knowing that you've done everything you can, and, you know, have a good night's sleep on that. So it is also finally caused me to rethink what learning is, because we've had a radical shift in our environment, in our population. We've had a tremendous amount of trauma. And so when I look out at the greater world, I often have been reflecting, particularly in the last months, about what is important to learn, particularly in early elementary education. And how do we prioritize those things? And how do we center intentionality around those things? And how do we position ourselves to fight back when the quiet parts are said out loud? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So many beautiful thoughts to sit with. I get to introduce our third speaker now, Jenifer Crawford. Dr. Jenifer Crawford is a professor here in clinical education at the University of Southern California's Rossier School of Education. Her work focuses on critical multilingual pedagogies, translanguaging, and democracy in language education, examining how teachers and communities use language and technology to co-create more just conditions in schools and society for racially and linguistically minoritized learners, including returned migrant and other transnational students. She has lived and taught English and bilingual education in secondary schools, popular education projects, and universities in California, Mexico, and Brazil. Dr. Crawford co-coordinates the USC Rossier's Democracy Project, which designs curriculum and professional learning with secondary teachers and school leaders to support more democratic, justice-oriented classrooms. Her commitment to democratic practice also extends to her own institution, where she advances shared governance and connection across difference through the UF-UAW Faculty Union Campaign, co-chairs the Academic Senate Faculty Environment and Employment Committee, and co-leads binational courses, conferences, and research. She speaks Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian, and lives in Los Angeles with her partner and 3 children.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's here today and everyone who made today possible. I want to speak to context first. We are in a context of global democratic decline. I think it's important that we name that. Students, educators, and schools are directly impacted. Oops, sorry. Schools, excuse me. Schools, students, educators, and schools are directly impacted. During interviews our binational team conducted this year, faculty have shared how national policies in 2 research universities in US and Mexico impact their research, teaching, and service. One way to quantify the global decline is that the world has fewer democracies than autocracies for the first time in 20 years, according to the 2025 Democracy Report by the VDEM Institute. Mexico is an electoral democracy, and the US is a liberal democracy with free multi-party elections, varying degrees of judicial and legislative constraints on the executive, and some protection of civil liberties and equality before the law. The Democracy Report argues that both US and Mexico's democracies are in decline, with decreasing judicial and legislative constraints on the executive and a decline in freedom of expression, academic, journalistic, media, and self-censorship. The faculty in our study expressed declining freedom of expression, conflicts between local and national priorities, and a lack of infrastructure of support to bolster democracy in their research, teaching, and service. Mobilization for democracy worldwide is also on the rise, with societal resistance to autocratization. So this is not all terrible. We see universities and media acting as sites of democratic mobilization through transnational struggle for inclusion, access, and freedom of expression. Last semester, I had the honor of working at La Universidad Veracruzana, where 800 returned migrants are currently enrolled. The impact of democratic decline transcends borders. Within the context of new trends in US-Mexico return migration that are reshaping student demographics in universities in Mexico, there is a significant gap in access to higher education for returned migrant students in Mexican universities compared to their non-migrant peers. At UV in Veracruz, students, faculty, and staff are challenging. I forgot. There's so many here. No, there's a lot. I wanted to tell each story, but then that would have taken me a very long time. And my very wise undergrad students said, focus on the main points. So here we go. So at UV, students, faculty, and staff are challenging language and class discrimination of returned students and co-creating classroom belonging, supporting institutional agency, and constructing media visibility at the local and state level. For example, colleagues and I have designed a faculty professional learning course to leverage pedagogical translanguaging and institutional agency with returned students. These efforts mobilize for democracy through what W.E.B. Du Bois calls real education, the development of power and ideal, where students have a right to know, to think, and to aspire. In the Rossier Democracy Project, secondary teachers and students in red and blue counties and districts in California and New Mexico are mobilizing for democracy through action civics. Through issue-based curriculum, students inquire, deliberate, act, and reflect on polarizing issues to protect civil liberties and equality before the law. These include issues related to climate change, school safety, and human rights. Students and teachers are invested in local civic action that ranges from working with school leaders and politicians for inclusion and access, as well as engaging in free expression across communities to build awareness and collaborate with those impacted by issues jointly identified. As Du Bois claims, either the United States will destroy ignorance or ignorance will destroy the United States. In his Niagara Movement speech in 1905, when facing another democratic decline from the firmly entrenched Jim Crow system of the state and local laws enforcing racial segregation and disenfranchising African Americans in the South, Du Bois asked how we can realize a multiracial democracy. And I think that's the question for us today, that I have been inspired by so many educators across the Americas and so many students. Du Bois answers by voting where we may vote, by persistent, unceasing agitation, by hammering at the truth, by sacrifice and work. I am humbled by the educators, students, researchers, and community members who continue to hammer at the truth, to sacrifice and work to mobilize democracy. And thank you so much again for this opportunity to talk with colleagues.
All right, thank you so much for that. Now that we have this wisdom moving through us, we wanted to invite you all to re-engage with each other because while there's so much wisdom up here, there's also so much wisdom in the room and online. And we want you all to have a chance to engage with each other around what's moving through you at this moment before we open up a dialogue with the whole room and the panelists. So I'm going to ask you again to find your partner, or online we'll put you in breakout rooms, and to reconnect and just share what is moving for you right now. That could be a key takeaway, that could be a feeling that you're having, but what is moving for you right now based on what you just heard? And we'll take about 5 minutes for this, so you can think about that as you're sharing the time with your partner. They did. Oh, okay. Thank you, everyone. Can we come back together, please? Can we please come back together? All right, thank you. Thank you so much for engaging with each other. We really want to honor all of the wisdom in the room and the virtual space, and I think part of that is you all getting to speak with each other. And now we have a good amount of time as well to get to have a collective dialogue. So we're going to ask if anyone wants to share in the room or online. Could be questions, thoughts, feedback that came out of these small conversations, but it could be anything that is moving through you as we are in this dialogue. And we'd really just like to open up the discussion. And I'm also, asking the panelists, because your presentations were so short, so if there's anything that you want to loop back to or any ways that you want to be facilitating this conversation, please feel free to chime in. But for now, would anyone like to share a thought, a question?
I guess I have a question for you. Did you ever think, I honestly never thought I'd see this, such a drastic A to Z move in terms of democracy and like some of our rights being taken away? Did you ever think, I honestly never thought, even on the first term, that I would see that. Have you ever experienced that or imagined that it would go this quickly this fast?
Is that for me?
Particularly you.
Wow. No, I didn't expect that. And what I'm going to connect it to a conversation that Kenzo and I were just having, if that's okay, and then invite you in.
Permission to share.
Thank you. I think how that matters for us as educators is that we do have to adhere to certain truths. And the truth that I adhere to, I hope my students can hold me accountable to this, a truth that I hope that we adhere to in our work is that we recognize the human rights and civil liberty of all of our students. And I think it is a problem when we start to say that we can have a conversation with anyone if if you can't see the humanity or if you can't engage in collaborative conversation. The trouble begins when we haven't prepared folks to engage in those kinds of civil conversations. And we need to learn better about how to do that. And I think we in this moment need to look back to other times of democratic decline, as well as look more broadly about who do we know who is really good at civil conversations? Who do we know is good at engaging in identification and solving of community problems across political divides, across difference? To me, that's something that mobilizing for democracy or countering autocracy and autocratic trends is something that's worth fighting for. And it's hard to do.
Yes, we agree on the hard part.
We agree on the hard part.
I mean, for some, in some respects, I think to imagine that any of us ever really fully experienced rights as they were intended is a foolish assumption, right? Because, as we poke holes in these mythologies, you could take a look at pay structures and find inequality there. Just last night at dinner, I was explaining to my 7-year-old and my 4-year-old how my uncle was one day at school and the next day in Manzanar, an internment camp, right? So, yeah, I think to think that rights could be stripped very quickly is not, far off in terms of our present day logic, but I think it can be traced back to what has happened historically. And I think, again, to imagine that we were ever enjoying our full rights, is again a myth.
Do I have to stand? Oh, I have to stand. Hi, my name is Leila Soliman. I'm Filipino, so I've actually been, because of, I don't know if you know our Philippine history, so we've been colonized, we've gone through a lot politically, so I've been trying to search for inspiration and empowerment from those who've lived before me, or who have seen it all. So one of my current heroes is Maria Ressa. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's the 2021 Nobel Peace Laureate winner, journalist who fought against the Duterte regime, and now Duterte is at the ICC being charged, right? So I feel like, and she's been warning us for the last 10 years about what was going to happen, because And I saw a recent interview by her to kind of answer. She saw it coming because she was a journalist for 20 years for CNN until she established her own Rappler network. And she had been warning the US, and she said that whatever they're doing, whatever they did with the Philippines, they were the guinea pigs for social media and Facebook. And whatever was deployed, it was just to test on the Philippines, but it was deployed for the US, for the Americans. And now it's here 10 years later. And so she said that right now, because she is Filipino American, for her, it's not just, it's trauma, but it's also, what's the word, deja vu. She's being subjected to deja vu at the same time. So she's seeing it, she's experiencing it again as a Filipino because she's experienced it before. But it's like 2 layers of experience as a Filipino American. So it's deja vu and I forget, like PTSD at the same time. So I thought, oh my gosh, that was mind blowing. But I want to offer something positive. Sorry, I'm shaking because I'm just really, passionate about this subject. But she said in her address to the Harvard graduate of 2024, her best advice is to choose your best self. And I've been trying to live that. Every day I'm like, choose your best self. Don't fight with anybody. I'm kidding. Turn crisis into opportunity and be vulnerable. And I think what she means by that is, Brené Brown, her definition of vulnerability is let your guard down first. Instead of trying to fight, you be the one to be open to dialogue and to receive, to listen, as opposed to fight. Like, lay down your shield, let's talk about it. And so I thought that we can do that. So that's all I wanted to share. I'm sorry, I'm so nervous.
Thank you. Do any of y'all want to respond?
I will respond. First of all, Maria Ressa is amazing. And for those of you who have not read her book or watched her film, just incredible person, I think, for us to learn from. And I think her work and her analysis reminds us that, like you said, like the deja vu, that this is something that continues to keep happening within our world, certainly within the United States. This is not the first time that we've had, and also, just depending on your experience here in the United States. I think some people in this country would say that they've lived under a fascist regime since the start. That's the displacement of Native people from their land and putting them in boarding schools and starving them and doing all those things. That's enslaving Black people for hundreds of years. And that seemed like a fascist regime, I think, to those families and those people. And so we, what we're experiencing right now, what she's calling attention to is saying, like, here's all the signs, and please listen, because we see it here, and obviously, like you said, the Philippines has had lots of experience with that. So now I appreciate your comment, and thank you for bring her into this space, because she's definitely one of my heroes and someone I'm trying to learn from and follow their lead. So yeah, thank you.
Do either of you two want to respond?
I mean, I'll respond simply to the idea of bringing your best self to things. I mean, I think that's incredibly hard. We don't live in vacuums. So when you're stepping into a professional environment or a classroom or even at home with your children or your family or whatever the family structure is, and the world is in crises, it's incredibly difficult to think about how to bring your best self. And I think it goes back to this idea of self-care, and something that was given to me and championed upon me is this idea that you cannot care for communities, you cannot give radical love and radical empathy unless you are doing the same for yourself. So I think I saw a submitted question somewhere in the dialogue here that was about that very notion of like, what do you do if you are tired and exhausted and you've hit the wall? Take a break. Take a break and take care of yourself. That's incredibly important, because you're not going to be, it's like that airplane oxygen mask theory. You're not going to be able to take care of anybody else unless you're taking care of yourself first. That is not a selfish thing. That is not a selfish idea. We need to kick that to the curb. The idea of self-care is incredibly important. So, and I think centering the idea of self-care allows you to bring your best self into those environments. And I also really want that hat. Like that beret is, yes. We gotta tell me where you got that.
Hi everyone, I'm Stevie. I'm a second-year student in the Educational Counseling program here at USC. And a question that I've been kind of dealing with, I think, throughout my time in the program is like the dissonance of being an institutional agent and belonging to institutions that may be contrary to your values. And so I guess my question is, how do you manage that dissonance while also advocating and staying strong for radical change? I know, Kenzo, you spoke a little bit about it while working in a predominantly white community. I also come from a predominantly white community, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you manage that and also still get change in different ways.
With no sarcasm intended, very carefully. I think the idea of being really strategic with what kinds of goals you want to accomplish and then how to accomplish them is incredibly important. For example, the school that I work at, it took a long time for us to get to the point where we could openly celebrate LGBTQIA plus communities without disruption or pushback. And this year, we did what we always do, and there was significant pushback. Empowered pushback. How could you introduce this to my child? Why would you introduce this to my child? And so for me, that's okay. All right, we're going to continue educating you on this issue. We're going to continue to center it. And I found a way to hire internally some teachers to work on some global studies curriculum where we will embed those issues and ideas. So instead of celebrating it as a National Heritage Month, we are going to celebrate it in our classroom curriculum. Because you may be able to push back on the heritage piece, but there's no way you're going to be able to push back on the curriculum piece, because we're going to align it with standards. We're going to make sure that it's centered. We're going to talk about being developmentally appropriate. We're going to hit you with those communications before it happens, right? So again, there's ways in which to do it. You just have to be really careful and really strategic with how and when you're doing it. And you have to have patience. And again, like our initial reaction could have been, all right, let's fight then. You really want this battle? Let's fight. I can talk to you about the importance. I can tell you why the members of our community who belong to this identity feel like it's important, but I don't want to fight that battle now. I'm going to continue instead to show you radical love, radical empathy, not hate on you. And I'm going to continue finding ways to educate children in ideas and values that we feel are important as a community. If they're not important to your family, that's okay. They're important to our community. So if they're not important to your family and they are to our community, there are other schools available to you. You can seek excellence elsewhere, right? And we have to draw those hard lines sometimes, But again, it wasn't the battle to fight in that moment. We needed to find other ways to be strategic and maneuver around it.
Can I
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Thinking about our relations, I just had this lovely memory of a former colleague of ours, Ray Baca, and I remember him, a former faculty member here. I remember him with his jazz music playing, saying, "Okay, you want to talk about institutional agents, and you want to talk about making change. Well, you need to think about action, and there's a framework for that." Stan Salazar, also was here, has a framework for institutional agency, and I think actually it's quite helpful to look back at that. In fact, many of the faculty who I was working with in Veracruz, who were trying to contest some of this sort of double discrimination that return migrants had faced in the trauma of leaving their home and returning to a new home, and thinking about how they change it. No one from either political spectrum, no one's against doing well by students. No one's against giving students support so they can persist in their area of study or school. No one's against mentorship and guidance. So the framework I think that Stan Salazar has for institutional agents is really powerful because it helps us move from civil conversations to action and advocacy, and I think that's what we need in this context. And even if we disagree about how we name the current context, we can all agree that we should do right by our students. We should help them, graduate or transfer or achieve their professional, personal goals. So I do think there are ways that we can enact advocacy that are in line with the explicit and stated mission of the schools and of the schools we work, and explicitly in line with the families and students that we work with. And that's really powerful and transformative. And it's not even gonna, get anyone fired. So that's important work. So I think we have to look back to ways that people have done that before. And I'm thinking a lot about Dr. Baca and Dr. Stan Salazar, who did that work.
Could I add to this? I think going back to the previous comment about crisis as opportunity, that might be part of it too. So that if you are experiencing some dissonance, is one to what does that feel like to you? You mentioned jazz. I love jazz, and there's lots of dissonance in there. And music is a great medium that has been dissonant or caused dissonance, and to have to rethink things. But I also want to just say too that because I had this realization too. I'm a social worker. I'm part of a system that has got a history that is chock full of great, really, really important things, and also terrible things. And I think that's kind of true probably across the board in just about everything. I like the Lakers, but there's also, there's things, right? And it just brings me to this idea, like, one, I'm not perfect. I'm probably at my own dissonance because I'm not congruent necessarily with all of my value system or what I'm thinking through things, or things are changing for me. Second, it reminds me of this article from Francis Lee, who wrote this article called Excommunicate Me from the Church of Social Justice, which is about this idea that even on very left, for Francis Lee, that they are very left-leaning radical activists, but also realizing that they are in these spaces and getting canceled or feeling like they have to be one very, very specific way, very pure way to be an activist or a critical thinker or whatever. And they likened it to being in a church where there's like this test, like a purity sort of test, this like a colonial logic of testing you and constantly testing you. And I thought it's a really interesting idea because it helps, I think, shift out of like a binary view that I get stuck in at times, where I'm looking at one place as only this, and it cannot be, it's unredeemable, and there's nothing else there. And I certainly don't want people to view me that way, although they may, but I'm much more than that. I'm complex and filled with contradiction. Which just one more thing too, which think about dissonance. I don't know if anyone watched that TV show, Reservation Dogs. Mm-hmm. You seen that show? Like, if you've seen that show, like they focus on Native people and they're full human beings. That's a dissonance. And they're in a media industry that is trying to carve out space for indigenous people and indigenous histories and indigenous experiences. But those characters are flawed, and they're human. And that's what I think is so important about that's why it's so beautiful, that show, and why it's so meaningful to a lot of people. So anyways, that was my riff, but that was a good question. Thank you.
Thank you for these. Do we decide we don't have a way to take questions online, right? Or
I can share them once we receive them, but at the moment we don't have any.
Okay, cool. Then for folks in the room, we welcome more questions, feedback. I mean, we love you sharing your thoughts too, and to get to be in conversation with you. Doesn't just have to be a question.
We have one.
I'm not sure this is a question, but it's open for commentary. A couple of things I'm thinking about as this presentation is going on. One of them is the new initiative at USC about having difficult dialogues. And so it's just starting, and it is USC's answer to not capitulating to certain conditions they were asked to capitulate to by the top of our government right now. And they have to do with free speech and all kinds of rights. However, USC is being punished by withdrawal of funds. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I don't know if anybody saw some of the news today, but there were a lot of protests because the UC system is raising their tuition and lowering their student aid amount. So on the heels of all this, I just would like to hear commentary from our speakers.
Can I add one thing? Robert Madrano's in the room. He's our project specialist for the Democracy Project. And on his lap, he holds the slides for thank you, for the deliberation that we're going to do with some of the undergrads sitting here in the room tomorrow in our undergraduate class. And what we've been trying to do is take the model that we're working with secondary schools around inquire, deliberate, act, and reflect, and figure out ways we can adapt those deliberations or civil conversations towards local problem solving for the university classroom. So Rob Philback, myself, and others have been trying to pilot this in our undergraduate and graduate courses this semester. So tomorrow we're going to have a conversation. Dr. Madrano is going to be leading a conversation around free speech at USC, and we're going to be interrogating. We're going to send you a letter, Dr. Hinga, about what the students think should be our position at Rossier on freedom of speech and the current USC policy and the ways that this was addressed or not. Those rights were upheld or not upheld in the previous year on campus, and it's not about right or wrong or left or right, but it's really about here's 3 different proposals on ways that we could address our current policy. What do we think would be best for our campus among students? So I think an angle towards not putting this in binaries, but rather thinking through how do we collectively identify a local problem and then collectively evaluate, interrogate some of those possible solutions that we see from other schools, other communities, et cetera, and working towards what makes sense to all of us and not having to necessarily come to full consensus either. So that's one part, and I'm really excited about that. Anyone who'd like to come, I hope it's okay with the other guys, anyone who'd like to come and join that deliberation is welcome from noon to 1:50 SOSB 49. You're welcome to join.
I mean, I'm probably not educated enough on this subject, but this is a private school, correct? Yeah. So, I mean, I would question what kinds of funds are being withheld, but ask the first question I would have is why is a private institution taking funds from the government? But that's probably another question or query to explore later. And then the UC piece, I mean, not funding student aid is incredibly damaging, but I mean, can we expect anything less from the administration that we're seeing? I mean, I think the attack on immigrant populations is a very real thing. I think there are threads that you could pull on there where they are continuing to focus on dismantling public education as a human right and as a value. A lot of public education institutions get their money from attendance. There are a ton of children afraid to go to school right now, So what does that mean? And if you pull at that thread, like what's the long-term impact? And what are they actually trying to do in those positions of power to dismantle anybody's capacity for change or movement? Those are the kinds of questions that I would ask in return to you. I don't really have a whole lot in terms of statement or response outside of that.
I don't know that I have anything else to add. I'm still thinking about reservation dogs, I gotta be honest, and a cat. I don't, and I'm still thinking about the dissonance. I'm sorry, this is an important question, but that feels like a dissonance, and it made me think about, like, are we right now actively like engaged, like pushing back on it, just this gathering right here, or like the intentional effort to bring people together in dialogue like this? Maybe these are right here. This is the action, and you're part of it right now. Maybe that's it, and this is where it starts these conversations.
I mean, I currently work in an independent school in Los Angeles, and it operates, I think, a lot different than charter or public. When our school burned down, there were a lot of folks jumping onto FEMA bandwagons to recoup some of the financial loss that they suffered, because insurance only covered so much. And part of the advice and counsel we were given by different lawyers was not to take the funds, because they could eventually dictate what our academic program looked like. And part of the reason why I enjoy being in an independent school is because we are, we do have autonomy in terms of our curriculum and our choices. And I didn't want to be a part of a structure that would have eventually had some oversight by the federal government, particularly in its current state. So we decided not to accept FEMA funds. I don't know if that's public, but I just blasted it out there. So there you go. But yeah, I mean, not to let you into our financials, but yeah, that was a really big discussion that we had as a community, and decided not to take the funds because we didn't want to risk being told how to teach or what to teach. I'll let them know you clapped. I'll take it back. Oh, there you
go. We were talking about relational accountability, the concept you brought up, and thank you. And what happens when you're in an institution where there's no sense of accountability, and how people behave under those circumstances. And these are educational institutions where theoretically they have a mission to serve, but because there's no accountability, that mission gets lost. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts about how do you transcend that? Because we live in a society that has no relational accountability for the most part. We drive by people suffering in our streets regularly, and unless we know them, we may not stop and check on them. So how do you, because the concept, it seems like it's a really powerful one, if you can bring it about.
That's it. That's the challenge. Well, one, I would say tell these people to read read Dr. Wilson's book, to try to get some understanding on like how he's thinking about it, and how this idea came to him and why it's so important to him. That's a really difficult question. I always bring it back to like what's in front of me and what I could do in this moment right now with the people in front of me, and then also trying to think ahead, to future classes or future relations that I may have with people, and how those things are gonna affect. In some indigenous teachings, there's a view of 7 generations. And that's thinking about what you do now and the ideas that you do now is it will ripple across for at least 7 further generations. And I think if you start making policy decisions thinking about 7 generations down the road, that's very powerful. I learned a story from Dr. Karina Walters, who's a social worker up at University of Washington, and she wrote an article and talked about during the forced removal of Cherokee people, when they were being forcibly moved, some of their members left these markings on trees. I don't know if anyone had heard of this. They call them arborglyphs. But they left markings on trees in their language so that when they got to the new place, their kids there, their family there, could find their way back to their place. And they guarded that language. No one. It was like under penalty of death, because like they didn't trust any white people at that time to give up this language and to know where we came back, how they get back, and indeed later generations were able to kind of find their way back using these markers and these trees. And I think that's a relational accountability. That's an important idea for us to think about and to consider. I don't know how that translates here, but we're I think kind of figuring it out how to do it in some way. I feel like today's conversation maybe plant those seeds, or maybe inspiring people to kind of think differently about the next time they interact with people. Yeah, so I'm sorry that my answer may not be very satisfying in that regard as like a further response, but yeah.
Is it okay if I add this to your comment?
Yeah.
Hi there. First off, thank you to our panelists for their generosity in joining us today and contributing to this discussion. Dino Guerra, I think you pose a very great question in regards to how do we practice this relational accountability, right? And yesterday, I just shared in my class the South African term. It's called Sawubona, right? And Sawubona is a greeting that means I see you, right? And I think it's interesting here at USC, where we already have this culture and this affiliation with this terminology. At football games, what do we say to one another? Fight on, right? And so fight on is already embedded in this culture. It's this process or this acknowledgement that I see you, right? My parents recently went on a trip to Vienna. My parents didn't go to USC, but their children did. And my parents were wearing their USC hat, USC gear on, and they were boarding the airplane, or they were deboarding the airplane. And a student came, or a student from USC saw them, and the student passed by and said, "Fight on," right? And to me, this is such a great example of how we really see the humanity in other. And this is, of course, surrounded with, the context of football and all of these things. But how great would it be if we can contextualize that within just the context of our humanity? Like, I see you, Kenzo, because I see you across the room, and that matters to me, right? And so, and I think what I wanted to share here is that these ways of being that are perhaps central or rooted in other cultures, right? They exist in our world, right? They're part of a lot of people's realities. And Sawubona is, as I mentioned, South African. I believe it's Zulu. It's a Zulu term. But I can also relate that I'm Filipino. Shout out to the Maria Ressa, shout her outer. And there's this term in Tagalog also. It's called kapwa. Right, and it's the shared inner being, meaning like I see you, you see me, right? And there's other terms like that, like wa, harmony, right? And familia. I mean, there's so many different ways that we experience the shared kinship, and I think if we have the ability to center that in these conversations and center that in our exchanges, that will go a long way towards that transcendence that you were inquiring about, Dino Guerra.
I mean, I think that has to do a lot with culture building, and the internal culture of whatever institution, place, environment you're talking about. I mean, I read an article recently about toxic rock stars being rewarded in a workplace. And oftentimes the toxic rock star is rewarded at the peril of folks of color. And, if you walk into a school, you can see it pretty clearly. These teachers that are excelling at their craft and have the classroom's attention, and yet when they relate to their peers and colleagues are incredibly toxic human beings. So, I think your question has to do, yes, with what everybody is talking about here. But for me, it's like, how do you build that culture? I think one of the things that I've learned a hard lesson about is culture is really important. We lost our school. I keep going back to it. It's relatively fresh, 11 months out. We lost our school. 90 students lost homes or were displaced, and yet we were able to come back in an interim space and keep our community intact. And in times of crises, keeping the community intact is a really, really hard thing to do. But I think the very fact that both parents and students and faculty and staff wanted to come back together and stay together, and we have held on, retention-wise, really strongly, speaks to the kind of culture that we've helped to build. And it is about relationship. It is about seeing people and being seen and feeling heard and valued and respected. And again, trying not to reward toxic rock stars, even though they might be brilliant educators, but again, at the peril of other people's feelings or work experience.
Just to add to that, I think relational accountability, maybe we could consider that a precondition of a civil conversation or dialogue and civic action. So whether we're thinking about Dean O'Gary, your conversations with Rick Hess and Common Ground, this idea of relational accountability, recognizing the humanity, and not even just recognizing humanity, but setting some ground rules of respect and seeking understanding of the other, I think is really important. And going back to our deliberations, that's the first slide. Maybe it's the second slide after the title for our deliberations. Is what is our ground rules? How do we don't call it a relational accountability, but how do we understand and recognize each other across difference, and do so in a way again that acknowledges human rights, civil liberties, and respects one another. I think it's incredibly important. It's a Siphian task.
Yes.
Just a comment as I'm thinking through things here in terms of relational and listening to you, Dr. Paez, and talking about your biases, acknowledging them, knowing that you also have flaws, talking about the vulnerability that happens. So abono, however you say that, seeing you, namaste that people see. And I'm thinking about for each of us that in all of our spaces and interactions, it bothered me today. I'm old school still, so I'm on Facebook, and it mentioned if you don't want to, and I'm not saying it verbatim, but if you don't want to have a lot of presents at Thanksgiving, bring up politics and you won't have to buy a lot of presents. And I'm thinking Thanksgiving is when you're thankful and grateful, and it should be community. And we shouldn't always have to have community. I think back to during the pandemic when people were so patient, they had grace for others, grace for themselves. Even when you drove, you put your indicator on, they let you over. And now that they feel they're out of the pandemic, they're cutting you off. We've lost that caring that it should not need a pandemic or a hurricane in Jamaica. How do each of us know that we are decent human beings, and no matter what, we can carry forth our decency to each other and share those in all spaces?
Yeah. Can I just say, I think, in social work, there's a theory there from Carl Rogers. He talks about like human-centered therapy. And as a student, and this is not no shade to USC here. I love this school, but like knowing like they told us that, like, I was like, yeah, this sounds awesome. You're like affirming people, you're empathetic. That's great. And then I thought to myself later, like many years later, like, but why do you have to call it human? What else could it be? It's like there has to be reminders. Us like when we say student-centered, like a student-centered approach. I'm like, but what else would it be? That's the thing we're doing. It's of course, but I feel like there's something in maybe the cultural norms we have, or the same stories we get again and again. But I feel like we have to keep reminding ourselves to turn on our blinkers, or to show each other decency, and to just engage in those kind of conversations. And I think when we kind of did it here, when we talked about gratitude or what grounds you all in that, and people came together very quickly and shared, and it was I seemed like it was a spirit. I think if I was interrupting you, and you came back into the conversation. So I think those things are really, really possible, and I feel like finding those examples wherever they're at, even if they're short-term projects, is learning from them. That we have, all those stories about people who woven rice or woven seeds into their hair or into their dresses to carry on for another generation. Like that. There's, well, how did you do that? Why, like all the quotes that you have up here, I'd like to learn more about that and listen to those folks. And maybe those people and those ideas can be brought into those meetings where accountability is being questioned or there's a lack of, and it needs to be practiced into a good habit. And so maybe it's inviting some of those stories in to think about what it could be like. Yeah. But thank you for that.
Yes. I know we only have a couple, maybe 4 minutes left. So maybe if any of the panelists, not to put you on the spot, but if you want to share a final thought for the group.
I just want to share gratitude for everyone who showed up today and everyone, again, who's working to mobilize democracy in all of our educational and social spaces. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. Just humbled by this opportunity, express my gratitude, and despite my ornery disposition, say that I still hold radical hope for humanity.
The people online cannot smell this room right now, but there's a food smell. There's like things have changed here drastically. And did anyone else notice that? I was like, all of a sudden it's like started creeping. I was like, wait, is there food? There's like, this smells great. Sorry that y'all can't experience that. But that was nice. No, just to say thank you to all the organizers for putting this on and inviting us to be here, and for everyone online and watching. Just really, really appreciative of being able to learn from you all, and thank you for your moderation today. And thank you all for your ideas. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I want to thank everyone too. This has been such a beautiful space. To echo what Kenzo said about hope, Miriam Kaba says that hope is a practice. She says she doesn't even feel it, and to her it's not an emotion at all, but it's how she shows up every day. So just reminded me of that, and you all showing up today, us getting to be in this conversation, the relationships that we're building, and maybe whatever's moving through us because of everything that we've shared today. Who knows what kind of seeds that will, what these seeds will bloom into in the future. So thank you all so much. Let's continue to build relationships as we're eating together. And thank you so much to our amazing panelists and the organizers of this event. Thank you.